Welcome back. This is John Sadak. While you were away, we had a mound visit, and it looks like they might be making a change. Yep, they're going to the lefty in the bullpen. It's Southpaw Sizzle. Here comes Stephen Offenbaker.
Welcome back to the Lefty in the Bullpen. I'm your host, Stephen Offenbaker. The Lefty in the Bullpen is brought to you by the Locked On Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad you could join us today. We've got an exciting show for you. I thought it was about time that we took a look at the Reds minor league system. We're into the middle of June now, and just take kind of a quick trip through the minor leagues and check in on how everything's going down on the farm. And I wanted to bring in somebody that lives and breathes Reds minor leagues, and I could not think of a better person than our guest today. You know him as the driving force behind both RedsMinorLeagues.com as well as RedLegNation.com. On my previous show, the Reds Alert podcast, I dubbed him the czar of prospect prognostication, which I dare you to try and say 3 times fast. He is, in fact, a minor league expert that knows a whole lot about what's going on with this Reds farm system. He is the one and only Doug Gray. Doug, how are you? And thanks for being here, man.
I'm pretty good, Stephen. You know, it's a nice Sunday here in Cincinnati where I'm at, and I'm just getting ready to settle in and watch about 5 different baseball games as soon as we're done with this.
You know, it is a rough life you lead when you're trying to figure out how you can squeeze in just one more baseball game.
What's nice right now is that the Dominican Summer League just started this past week, so I've got games that starts at 11 o'clock every day. And then the team out in Arizona, they don't start till 9. So, I mean, we're talking 12, 13 straight hours of baseball if I really want it to be. So, it's a rough life.
It is. Wow. That's a lot of baseball. It sounds amazing, but that is a lot of baseball. And that's why I brought you in today, Doug, because I don't think there are very many other people out there that are as dialed in on the Reds minor league system as you are. Certainly not anybody that doesn't work for the team at this point is dialed in as much as you are. So
that's what I was going to say. If the Reds aren't paying you and you're doing more coverage of the farm system than I am, then I mean, good luck. I don't know what else to tell you. So.
Well, let's dig into this system. I wanted to kind of take a quick look and just work our way through the system. We'll start down in Daytona, and basically, I wanted this to be an opportunity to hear about a couple guys at each level that are really performing well, that are players that we should know and we should be keeping an eye on. And I kind of will just throw the floor to you, starting down in Daytona.
I mean, realistically, right now, Daytona's struggling. I'm looking at their record right now. They're 10 games under 500. They're 22-32. Now, they do have some prospects on their team worth keeping an eye on, but overall right now, most of the team is kind of in a big slump. The top guy on the team on the offensive side is Jay Allen II. He was the supplemental first-round draft pick last year. He's having a solid year, but it's in kind of a weird way. He's hitting 247. He's got a 382 on base percentage, and he's slugging 343. Now, the Florida State League is a very pitcher-friendly league. Most guys don't hit for power there. There's a lot of reasons for it without really diving into it. Just take my word for it. Nobody hits for power there. But he's got 25 steals already in 48 games. He's only been caught 5 times. Outfielder, I think that everybody believes he can stick in center field. At this point, I mean, he's really the main offensive prospect on the team. They had another guy, Yerlin Confidant, who was down there, who was a top 25 prospect for me, but I think he's missed the last 4 weeks now with a quad injury. I maybe there's been an update that I just haven't gotten yet, but I haven't heard an update on when he should return. Last year, Confidant was the league MVP down in Arizona. Lots of power, but pretty much everywhere else in the rest of his game he needs to work on. But when he does return, he's another guy to really look forward to. But right now that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of like the big name prospects. But I do want to highlight one guy who, he's been having a very strong season down there. Ruben Ibarra. He's a large human being. He's listed at 6'5", 275. I've heard he's significantly bigger than 275. He was playing through some injuries in April and didn't really hit very well. But he got about a week off, and since he's come back at the start of May, he's hitting like 370 and slugging 700. Obviously at that size, as you would imagine, there's plenty of power in there. He's only slugging 434 right now, but again, that's because he had a very, very poor April. I don't want to say that he's a top prospect, but he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. He's a first baseman, and so that's obviously going to hurt his prospect status, just because first basemen really have to hit to be considered prospects, because it's the most hitter friendly position on the field. So you've really got to stand out above everybody else to kind of be looked at in that vein. But he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on down there.
Are either one of those guys a candidate to move up to Dayton anytime soon?
I don't think that you're going to see Jay Allen II move up. The Reds have been, for as long as I can remember, they don't move up guys in their first full season out of high school, no matter how good they're performing. The best performance I can think of coming out of high school for a first-year guy was Jay Bruce back in, I guess it was 2006. He was in Dayton. And he entered August hitting like 303. He was slugging nearly 600. They didn't promote him. And that's the best case you can come up with. They like to leave guys there that first full year, let them get acclimated to everything, and just kind of, let it happen. And then next year, that's really when they go, okay, if you are performing well, we'll promote you based on that. So I don't think he's going to move up. Now, a guy like, Ruben Ibarra, sure, I think you could see him move up. He came out of college. This is his first full year, but it's still one of those things. He's older. He's got more experience. The team is less, I don't know. They're more comfortable promoting guys like that.
So let's jump up to Dayton then, on the promotion scale there. Dayton, talk about a logjam of talent. That team is just amazing. And I don't know how to identify just one or two guys to pay attention to there. That's a fun team.
It really is. They've got one of the best records in all of minor league baseball. They're actually on a 4-game losing streak right now. And they're still 36-19. They're a very good ball club. They've got pitching, they've got hitting. Realistically, they might have the best prospect in the entire organization right now there in Ellie De La Cruz. He's currently hitting 287. He's slugging 563, and he's stolen 15 bases in 18 attempts in just 48 games. And really, those numbers don't tell the story. When you watch him play, he just does things that just don't make sense sometimes. He's incredibly fast. He's a switch hitter. I think he's a better left-handed hitter than a right-handed hitter, but that might just be because, one, he's young, so he doesn't have as many repetitions from the right side of the from the right side of the plate, because he doesn't face as many left-handed pitchers, just because, well, there aren't as many left-handed pitchers out there. So that could be something that can improve over time. But he's just a highlight reel. But he's not the only one. Alan Serta's there too. He was added to the 40-man roster this past offseason. He's only hitting 218. I don't think he's ever going to hit for a high average. But outside of that, he's got every tool you want to see. He's an outstanding defensive center fielder. He can run and get anything you want to see. He can throw. He's got an absolute laser. And he's got big time raw power. He's really fun to watch as well. That team has Reese Hines. Hines is like that Ruben Ibarra that we just talked about. He really, really struggled in April. He struck out 50% of the time he went to the plate in April. He's really cut back on his strikeouts since then. He's been under 30% over the last 2 months. And all of a sudden, he's got a 763 OPS overall there. And again, he hit like a $130 in April with no power. So that it's just been a massive turnaround. They've got Austin Hendrick now, who was the first round pick 2 years ago. If I'm going to be completely honest and fair, I'm not sure he's a top 25 prospect in the organization anymore. He struck out 40% of the time he stepped to the plate his entire career. It's not getting better. This year, at least when he's making contact, he's doing more damage, but you just can't strike out that much and make it to the big league. You just can't. He's going to have to make some real big improvements in that area. On the pitching side, man, it's tough to pick exactly where to start here, but I'm going to start with Joe Boyle. He's getting 0.84 ERA in 42.2 innings. So that's 4 runs. He's allowed 4 earned runs. He's given up 10 hits. 10 hits in 42.2 innings. Now, there is a drawback with that. He's walked 31 guys and he's hit another one. But when he throws strikes, guys are not able to do anything against him. I mean, he's just completely dominant when he's anywhere near the strike zone. He struck out 65 guys. So, I mean, realistically, you kind of sit back and wonder, is he really gaining anything by being in Dayton versus sending him up to AA? But with that walk rate, you kind of also sit back and think, okay, well, it's easier for him to work on control when, he knows, hey, I can get these guys out. There's a little bit more confidence there. And when you go to AA, you're going to get more patient hitters. So maybe that puts a little bit more pressure on him in the control department, and he can't work on things in game as much as maybe he would be able to in Dayton. So you can kind of see both points there. It wouldn't surprise me if he spends more time in Dayton, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they decide, hey, we need to challenge him a little bit more and maybe kind of put him in a situation where, he understands, hey, this isn't going to work as well here as it did there. And, maybe that kind of gives him an idea to work on this specific thing or that specific thing. Or maybe even it's just something as simple as, hey, we wanted to work with a different pitching coach, give him maybe just something that's said to him just a little bit differently than what he's been hearing that clicks. And maybe that, will help improve the control a little bit. I don't, when you hear that he's walked 35 guys in 42 innings, you picture somebody who's throwing it everywhere, like has no idea where it's going. And that's really not the case when you watch the games. He'll miss the strike zone, but it's not like he's, throwing it in each batter's box. So I do think that there is a potential there for him to, carve out a career as a good reliever. I still think that he's probably going to be a little bit too wild to be a starter in the long run. But you keep him as a starter now because you get more repetitions that way, more experience, and it's just easier to kind of work with that as long as he's continuing to have success as a starter. But they've got Bryce Bonin, who was there, although he just went on the injured list. He was a high draft pick a couple years ago. He's got a 2.52 ERA, but he's injured right now. One of the guys that I'm intrigued by is James Proctor. He's actually starting right now. He's pitching right now in Dayton. I don't want to say he's like Graham Ashcraft in the sense because he doesn't throw nearly as hard as Graham Ashcraft, but he is like him in the sense that he gets a ton of ground balls. Proctor's got enough stuff that I think that in the future he could be a potential reliever as well. But I really like the idea of guys who have the stuff to both miss some bats and get ground balls. He's still pretty far away, but I think that he's a guy that could, potentially be that guy who has a solid strikeout rate and gets a ton of ground balls in the future if he does move to the bullpen.
And, another guy you haven't mentioned yet, and I just want to spend just a couple seconds here talking about him, is everybody's favorite player to be named later, Connor Phillips, is also at Dayton right now. And the last few highlight reels of his that I've seen were very encouraging.
Yeah, now I'm glad you brought him up because I skipped right over him. He's brain fart. He was the player to be named later in that Seattle trade. And, when the trade happened, there was like, Brandon Williamson, the other prospect pitcher that came in that deal. They're like, he's a top 100 prospect. He's the best prospect in the deal. If you're asking me right now, Connor Phillips is a better prospect. Not just because of how he's performed. Brandon Williamson, he hasn't looked as good as he did last year when he was in the Mariners organization. But, Connor Phillips has been sitting 96 to 98. He's got a 2.83 ERA. He struck out 78 batters in 54 innings. And he's looked every bit as good as those numbers say. It would not surprise me if he's in Chattanooga real soon. He's been really good. He's had a few hiccups along the way, but everybody's going to have that. Mm-hmm. If you don't have hiccups along the way, you're Clayton Kershaw, and nobody's Clayton Kershaw.
Right?
Like that's what makes a guy, the best player in the league versus being a good player is the absolute inability to have, no bad games. Those guys are incredibly rare. So if they were asking me, who would I be looking to promote? He'd probably be at the top of my list on that team.
All right. Well, let's promote on up the system then. Let's head to Chattanooga and get your thoughts on what's going on for the Lookouts right now.
The big name on the Lookouts is probably Matt McClain. First round draft pick last year. Now there's some good and there's some bad in there. He's shown a lot of power. He's got 9 doubles, 3 triples, 10 home runs in 50 games. So that's very good. He's striking out a lot. For a guy who was coming out of college, who was more known for his hit tool than his power, that's kind of really flipped itself over since he's become a pro. You're seeing a lot more power than people expected, but the hit tool, it has not played well. He's hitting 238 right now, and I think that a lot of that is due to the strikeouts. And so you kind of wonder, is he selling out for a little bit of power right now? And that's caused the uptick in strikeouts, or is it just, they've been aggressive with him. I mean, he started the year in Double-A in his first full season. That's something the Reds really haven't done a lot of. Nick Senzel, Jonathan India, they both started in High A in their first full season, and the Reds got really aggressive with McLean. And so, those guys didn't get to Double-A until the second half. So I don't want to push any buttons like alert, be weary of what's going on here, because I mean, again, he's 22 years old. He's holding his own in Double-A, but you do want to see him, start to make contact a little bit more frequently and get that average to go up. I mean, last night he had 3 hits. The 10 games before that, he was 4 for 40. So he had definitely been slumping, and that's kind of pulled the numbers down a little bit. But even before that, he was still striking out a lot more than you would expect from a guy with his profile.
Do you foresee, and this, I would love to hear your thoughts on this particular issue, because there's a lot of middle infield talent working its way through this system. And, McLean is a shortstop. It does not appear that there's going to be room for him at shortstop anywhere in the near future. Do you foresee sometime soon the Reds starting to play him at other positions or make a position change with him?
Well, let's start off by saying that while in college, Matt McLean did play center field as a freshman. UCLA had another outstanding shortstop the same year that McLean got to play as a freshman, so they put him out in center field and then moved him to shortstop in his sophomore and junior years. So he does have experience in the outfield. Even when he was drafted, there were still some scouts out there saying, hey, we're not sure he's a big league defensive shortstop, maybe more of a second baseman, third baseman type, but with his speed, we'd play him in center field. So I wouldn't be surprised if down the road that were to happen. I think that right now you have to leave him at shortstop. For as well as Kyle Farmer shows himself at times in the big leagues, he's a 31-year-old guy who has, realistically, 1 season in the big leagues as a starting shortstop. He's not your future shortstop. Jose Barrero, who maybe we'll talk about in a minute, he's in AAA. He hasn't proven himself at the big league level yet. So you don't want to move somebody else off of shortstop in preparation that Jose Barrero is going to take over and be your future shortstop for the next 10 years, because you just don't know if that's going to happen yet. So you want to have all of your options on the table. Now, here's where things get interesting. Ellie De La Cruz is also a shortstop. If you get to a situation where you want to move him up because he's performing well in Dayton, how do you handle that? And I think that kind of is a situation where you create that logjam, because you have De La Cruz, who you want to play at shortstop as often as possible, McLean, who you want to play at shortstop as often as possible. Same thing for Barrero. And you kind of get that situation where it's like, okay, what do we do? So for me, I think that it would be in the Reds' best interest to leave all of them at shortstop right now, and just kind of let it shake out, see what happens. If somebody really, takes off and explodes beyond the other two, great. That's a great thing, but you don't do that until you have to.
And a wise manager once said, these things take care of themselves sometimes as well. So maybe that will in fact shake itself out. In Chattanooga, is there anybody on the pitching side of things that we should be paying attention to as far as the arms go?
They just got Andrew Abbott. He had spent most of the season with Dayton this year, and he was outstanding. I guess I should say he just got there. He's been there for I think 3.5, 4 weeks now. Overall, he's made 10 starts, he's made 9 starts and 1 relief appearance. Now, the relief appearance came in relief of a major league rehabber, so he still threw a starter's worth of innings. He just came in, and I think it was the second inning he took over in that game. He's got a 2.21 ERA this year. 75 strikeouts and 14 walks. Now, he doesn't have the biggest stuff in the world, but he's got 4 average to better big league pitches. Nothing that really is, going to get confused with a Hunter Green or fastball, Luis Castillo changeup, but everything he throws is good. It's quality. But I think that he's a guy that definitely earned the promotion to Double-A. But I think that he's also a guy who is going to have to, I don't want to say have to prove it necessarily, but he may not get the benefit of the doubt because his stuff doesn't really jump off the page at you. But I do think that he's probably a top 15, maybe 10 prospect in the organization right now. And being at AA, being a left-hander, things can open up and happen real quick for you. So, I mean, he's probably the best pitching prospect on that team right now. Outside of, we just talked Brandon Williamson, who's also a lefty. But, right now, Williamson is just really struggling to find that consistency. I think the stuff isn't quite as good as it looked last year. I know you didn't really ask about him, but I feel like he's probably somebody we should talk about a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, those two guys on the pitching staff are really the ones to keep an eye on. I'm going to throw out the name Carson Spires as well. He's another one of those guys who he doesn't have that stuff that really jumps off the page, but he knows how to pitch. He's got, 3 to 4 quality pitches. But I think that his performance is going to dictate how he moves as well. Just because, he doesn't have that stuff that really, lights up the radar gun, doesn't have that plus breaking ball.
All right, and let's jump to our final stop of the Reds minor league tour for this episode. That's going to be the Louisville Bats, or the Cincinnati Reds South, as their roster looks like a lot right now. Diving into Louisville, it's a little bit more of an interesting conversation, I think, because you get to look at this through the prospect young talent of that lens, but also through the lens of, is there anybody down there right now that could come help the Cincinnati Reds team that is not quite performing up to par? So however you want to address this level, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the only, outside of the rehabbers that they have there right now, Jonathan India is there. Donovan Solano's there. I'm not sure. Max Schrock is technically still on the rehab assignment, but he's not playing today. So I don't know if, he's got to be coming up on the end of his rehab days anyway. So I'm not sure if maybe they just said, hey, get on a plane and meet us out in Arizona, and he'll be ready to go by then or not. Outside of those guys, I'm not sure. Jose Barrero's there, but I'm the biggest Jose Barrero needs to be in the big leagues guy you're going to find. He's not ready right now. He didn't have any spring training because of the hamate injury. I don't think his timing is there. I think he needs to see more pitches and kind of get things rolling. He struggled so far. When he does make contact, he's been able to hit for power, but it's another one of those situations. He's got 29 strikeouts in 19 games. He needs more time right now. As far as the prospects goes, that's about it. Now, part of that is, you've got some of the guys that would be considered, bench caliber prospects that are in the big leagues right now because of all the injuries. Your Alejo Lopez, your TJ Friedl, guys like that. But pitching wise, you're going to have a lot
Talk
of
to me a little bit about Dowry Moretta, because I was really high on him, and I know you were too last year. We talked about him a couple times, and I was really hopeful that coming into this season, being with the big league team, he'd be able to kind of put it together and stick. That didn't happen, but what's going on with him, and could we, realistically maybe expect to see him again this year?
Honestly, I haven't done a deep dive into it, but from my, observations in the big leagues this year, I think the biggest thing is that last year he had outstanding command of his fastball. This year he hasn't had that, and he's paid for it. He's been able to get away with it in AAA, but he has not been able to get away with that in the big leagues. Big league hitters are really good. You cannot make mistakes against big league hitters. And, that he relies on his fastball a lot. And when you can throw it exactly where you want it, his fastball is good enough to do that. But when you miss over the middle of the plate, it's not good enough to do that. Hardly anybody's fastball is good enough to do that in the big leagues. And I think that, at least from what I can see, that's been the biggest issue for him. I don't know if it's a mechanical thing or what. Hopefully they get it figured out, because I do think that he's got big league talent. But he's not ready right now. Until he can get back to where he can throw the fastball exactly where he wants it. I think that he'll continue to probably have some struggles in the big leagues. And that's kind of the same thing for a lot of the pitchers in Louisville. Is they're good enough to make mistakes in AAA, but they're not consistent enough to avoid those mistakes in the big leagues. And when you make those mistakes in the big leagues, they're going to get hit. Now, the one pitcher to keep an eye on, starting wise, that's in AAA right now is Ben Lively. I don't think, he's 30 years old. He's got some big league experience in the past. He's pitched overseas. But right now, he's pitching very well in Louisville. So if they do, for whatever reason, need a starting pitcher to come up, which may or may not be the case because, Nick Lodolo is starting his rehab assignment tomorrow. And so that'll kind of give him another situation where, hey, what do we do when he's ready to come back? But I think that if there is going to be a need for a starting pitcher relatively soon, he'd probably be the guy. Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of, how do I want to say this? Future contributors to the big leagues right now on that team. And, I think that some of that is probably due to the fact that the injured list in the big leagues is, 13 or 14 players deep. So a lot of guys that would be in Louisville in a normal scenario aren't there right now. They're already in the big leagues. So I don't want to say that, the Reds have done a poor job of trying to, put together a good roster for Louisville. They've just been hampered by injuries at the big league level that really drained that team of talent.
Yeah, it's pretty unprecedented, the volume of injuries that the Reds have sustained this year. So I can totally see what you're saying. Well, listen, Doug, I appreciate you being here, taking the time to kind of run us through the system. Again, he is Doug Gray. You can follow him on Twitter at DougDirt24. You can read his stuff at redlegnation.com. You can read his stuff at redsminorleagues.com. You can sign up for his Patreon email newsletter. Did I miss anything? Did I get them all?
I'm also doing the Reds column at Baseball America once a month if you have a subscription over there. So yeah, I think that's probably it. I'm everywhere, man.
Right on. All right. He is Doug Gray. I appreciate you being here. That is going to wrap up this edition of the Lefty in the Bullpen. You can follow us on the Locked On Reds YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button right below if you haven't done that yet. And also make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Reds podcast, your team every day. Until then, I'm Steve Offenbaker, and we will talk to you next time. See you later.